Sagittarius, welcome to your reading for the beginning of July, this Wednesday, July 1st reading. I hope you're doing well. So let's go ahead and get started. You already feel it pressing against the edges of your life like something alive trying to get in, not gently, not politely, with force, with the kind of insistence that doesn't negotiate, doesn't wait for you to be ready, doesn't care whether you've braced yourself or whether the timing is convenient or whether you'd rather keep things exactly as they are for just a little while longer. Something is pushing toward you with the full weight of inevitability behind it, and the pressure of its approach is already showing up in your body. You've been restless. Sleep has been strange, either too heavy, pulling you under like a current, or impossibly thin, leaving you stranded on the surface of consciousness at hours when the rest of the world is dark and quiet and you're alone with thoughts that won't stop circling. Your appetite has shifted. Your patience has shortened. There's a tension in your jaw. You keep catching yourself holding a tightness across your shoulders that won't release no matter how many times you roll them back. A feeling in the pit of your stomach that sits somewhere between dread and anticipation. And you can't tell which one it is, because in this case, they feel almost identical. That's because what's coming carries both. It carries the dread of a truth you're not sure you want to know, and the anticipation of a freedom you can only access by knowing it. Wednesday is the fulcrum, July 1st. Something about that date has already been pulsing in the background of your awareness, even if you couldn't name it. Maybe you glanced at a calendar and your eyes snagged on it for a beat too long. Maybe someone mentioned it in passing and your stomach dropped for no apparent reason. Maybe in a dream or a half-awake state, something whispered that date to you and you dismissed it as noise. It wasn't noise, it was signal. That date is a hinge point, a day where the door between what you currently believe to be true and what is actually true swings open with enough force to rattle every window in the house of your understanding. And what walks through that door is not going to be gentle. It's going to be brutal in the way that only truth can be brutal, not because truth is cruel by nature, but because when it has been locked away for a long time, when it has been suppressed and buried and sat upon by people who had every reason to keep it hidden, its emergence carries the accumulated force of all that containment. It doesn't tiptoe, it detonates. I want to talk about what's been hidden, because the concealment itself is part of the story, and understanding how something was kept from you is essential to understanding why its revelation is going to hit as hard as it will. This wasn't an accidental oversight. This wasn't someone forgetting to mention something important or a piece of information that slipped through the cracks of busy, complicated lives. This was deliberate, strategic, maintained over time with a consistency that required effort, real, sustained, conscious effort. Someone in your life, possibly more than one person, has been actively managing your access to a specific truth. They've been curating what you know, editing reality before it reaches you, deciding on your behalf and without your consent which pieces of information you're allowed to have and which ones need to be kept behind a curtain you didn't even know was there. And they've been so skilled at it, so seamless in their management of your perception, that you've been living in a version of reality that feels complete. It doesn't feel like anything is missing. The picture looks whole, but it's not. There's a piece that was removed so carefully, so cleanly, with such surgical precision that the remaining image closed around its absence like skin healing over a splinter smooth on the surface, but with something foreign still embedded underneath, quietly causing inflammation you couldn't trace to its source. That splinter is about to be extracted, and the process is going to hurt. Not because the truth itself is designed to wound you. Truth is neutral. It simply is what it is. But because the removal of something that has been embedded for that long disturbs everything that grew around it. Beliefs you built on incomplete information are going to wobble. Decisions you made with confidence are going to be revealed as having been made on corrupted data. Moments you interpreted one way are going to flip suddenly and irreversibly into meaning something entirely different. And the disorientation of that, the dizzying, almost nauseating experience of your understanding of reality reorganizing itself in real time is going to be one of the most intense cognitive and emotional events you've experienced in a very long time. But I need you to hear me when I say this. The disorientation is temporary. The clarity that follows it is permanent. Let me describe the nature of this truth without naming it too specifically, because the energy is showing me impressions and patterns rather than literal details. And I want to honor the precision of what I'm receiving without overstepping into territory where specificity could mislead you. What's being revealed is connected to a relationship. Not necessarily romantic, it could be familial, it could be a deep friendship. It could be a professional bond that carried emotional weight beyond its formal structure. But there's a person at the center of this, a person whose role in your life has been defined by a narrative that you accepted as fact. And that narrative, the story of who they are to you, what they've done for you, what their motivations have been, what their loyalty has looked like behind closed doors, that narrative contains a fundamental inaccuracy, not a small one. Not a matter of perspective or interpretation where reasonable people could disagree. A factual inaccuracy. Something that was presented to you as truth, that you internalized as truth, that you made emotional and practical decisions based on as truth, and that was not true, was never true. Was constructed specifically to prevent you from seeing something that, once seen, would change everything about how you relate to this person and possibly several others connected to them. The reason it's coming out now, the reason Wednesday, the reason this specific window of time is because the structure that has been holding the lie in place has developed a fracture that cannot be repaired. Something happened recently, or is in the process of happening, that has shifted the conditions under which the concealment was possible. Maybe a third party who was complicit in maintaining the secret has had a change of heart. Maybe a document, a message, a piece of evidence has surfaced in an unexpected place. Maybe the person at the center of the deception made a mistake, said something to the wrong person, contradicted their own narrative in a way that someone noticed, left a digital or paper trail they thought they'd covered but didn't. Whatever the catalyst, the container has cracked. And what's leaking through that crack is going to reach you by Wednesday with the kind of force that doesn't allow for gradual absorption. You're going to go from not knowing to knowing in a single moment. One conversation, one discovery, one sentence that lands like a fist to the sternum and leaves you standing in the rubble of a belief system you didn't know was built on sand. I want to prepare you for the emotional sequence because it's going to move fast and it's going to be layered in a way that makes it hard to process any single feeling before the next one arrives. The first thing you'll feel is shock. Pure, clean, almost physical shock. The kind where your body goes cold and your hearing changes and the world takes on a slightly unreal quality, as if you've been suddenly transplanted into a scene that looks like your life but doesn't quite feel like it. That shock is protective. It's your nervous system buying you time, creating a buffer between the impact of the information and your full emotional response to it. Let it do its job. Don't fight through it. Don't force yourself to react before the shock has run its course. Some people feel pressure to respond immediately, to cry, to yell, to confront, to do something. But the most powerful thing you can do in the first moments after a truth like this lands is absolutely nothing. Be still. Let the information settle into your body without trying to organize it into a response. The response will come. It doesn't need to be rushed. After the shock, the anger arrives. And I want to give the anger room here because I think you've been conditioned to suppress it, to manage it, to wrap it in understanding and empathy before you've even finished feeling it. The anger that's coming is not pretty. It's not the controlled, righteous, spiritually acceptable kind of anger that makes for good Instagram quotes. It's raw. It's hot. It's the fury of a person who gave their trust to someone, who wielded it like a weapon, who opened their heart to someone, who used the opening as an access point for deception, who built a portion of their life on a foundation that someone else knew was rotten and watched them build on it anyway. That anger deserves to exist. It deserves space. It deserves to be felt all the way to its floor without being intercepted by premature forgiveness or rationalized into something more comfortable. You can be a spiritual person and still be enraged. You can be a compassionate person and still want to burn something down. The two are not contradictory. They're both honest responses to being lied to by someone who owed you truth. Underneath the anger, there's going to be a grief that I almost don't want to describe because of how tender it is. It's the grief of lost time, of decisions made in good faith based on false information, of moments where you chose this person, prioritized them, defended them, believed in them against your own quiet doubts that in retrospect were your intuition trying to tell you what your conscious mind wasn't ready to hear. You'll think about specific moments, specific conversations where something felt slightly off, where a detail didn't quite land, where your gut whispered a question your heart was too loyal to ask. And you'll realize, with a sorrow that goes deeper than words, that you knew, some part of you always knew. Not the specific truth, you couldn't have guessed the details, but the presence of a lie, the shape of an absence where truth should have been, the almost imperceptible weight of something being withheld. You sensed it. You felt it in your body, in the way your stomach tightened during certain conversations, in the way your dreams produced images that made no logical sense but carried emotional charge. Your body was reading the room more accurately than your mind, and you overrode it. Not because you were foolish, because you loved them. And love, in its most generous and most naive form, chooses belief over suspicion every time. That choice wasn't a mistake. I need you to hear that clearly. Choosing to trust was not your error. The error belonged to the person who was trusted and who violated that trust. There's a tendency, when deception is revealed, for the deceived person to turn the lens of judgment on themselves, to ask what they missed, why they didn't see it sooner, what flaw in their character allowed them to be fooled. But being deceived is not a character flaw. It's a consequence of being genuine in a world where not everyone matches your genuineness. The person who deceived you was counting on your goodness. They weaponized the very quality that makes you trustworthy, your willingness to extend trust, and used it as cover for their dishonesty. That's not a reflection of your weakness. It's a reflection of their calculation. Now, I want to move into something that I think is going to surprise you, because amid all the heaviness of what I'm describing, there's a current of liberation running through this that is impossible to ignore. The truth that's coming on Wednesday is not just an ending, it's a key. A key to a door you've been standing in front of for longer than you realize, rattling the handle, pushing against the weight of it, wondering why it won't open no matter how hard you try. And the reason it wouldn't open was never about your effort or your worthiness or your readiness. The reason was the lie. The deception was functioning like a deadbolt on that door, keeping it sealed from the other side, locking you in a room you'd outgrown while ensuring you couldn't access the larger space that was waiting for you beyond it. When the truth comes out, when the lie is exposed, collapsed, rendered inoperative, that deadbolt disengages. The door doesn't just open, it swings. And what you find on the other side is going to make you understand with the kind of clarity that rewrites a person's entire relationship with their past, why this had to happen. Why the timing is now. Why Wednesday? Why this moment? Why everything that came before was arranged in exactly the sequence it was arranged in. There's a freedom on the other side of this revelation that your current self cannot fully imagine because your current self is still operating within the constraints of the lie. You've been making decisions, managing relationships, structuring your life around a reality that has a false element embedded in it, and that false element has been so subtly you couldn't detect it, distorting everything, like a compass with a magnet placed near it, throwing the needle off by just a few degrees. Not enough to make you obviously lost, but enough that over time, over distance, the deviation accumulates. You end up miles from where you thought you were heading, and you can't figure out how you got there because each individual step seemed correct. The magnet is the lie. And when it's removed, the compass recalibrates. Your internal navigation system, which has been struggling against an invisible interference for far too long, suddenly points true. And the direction it points in is going to astonish you, because it's not where you've been going, it's where you were always meant to go. And the gap between those two directions is the measure of how much this deception has cost you. I want to address something that I feel lurking in the shadow of this message, something you might not want to look at directly, but that needs to be brought into the light if this revelation is going to do its full healing work. There's a possibility, and I want you to sit with this gently, without forcing yourself to any conclusions, that the person at the center of this deception is someone you still love. Someone whose betrayal doesn't automatically erase the genuine moments you shared. Someone who is not entirely monster and not entirely victim and not entirely anything, because humans are complicated and the people who hurt us most are often the people who also gave us real things, real laughter, real support, real presence during times that mattered. And holding both of those realities simultaneously, the reality of the betrayal and the reality of the genuine connection, is one of the most emotionally demanding things a person can be asked to do. You're going to be asked to do it, and I'm telling you now because you need to hear it before you're in the middle of it. You don't have to choose. You don't have to decide immediately whether this person is all bad or whether the good parts were real or whether the relationship is salvageable or whether you're done. You can hold the contradiction. You can sit in the discomfort of not knowing. You can feel the love and the fury and the grief and the confusion all at once without resolving any of it into a tidy narrative. The tidy narrative can come later. Right now, in the raw aftermath of revelation, the only thing required of you is honesty. Honesty about what you feel. All of it. Even the parts that contradict each other. There's another person connected to this situation who has been waiting almost as long as you have for this truth to surface. This person knows. They've known for a while, and they've been carrying the burden of that knowledge in a way that has been quietly destroying them. Not because they're guilty of the deception, they're not the architect of it, but because they were aware of it and found themselves trapped between competing loyalties, competing fears, competing versions of what the right thing to do actually looks like when doing the right thing means blowing up someone else's carefully maintained fiction. This person has wrestled with their conscience. They've come close to telling you multiple times, moments where the words were right there, where you were sitting together and the truth was pressing against the back of their teeth with almost unbearable pressure, and they swallowed it again and again. Not because they didn't care about you, because they cared about you and were terrified of being the one to deliver a blow they knew you weren't expecting. Their silence wasn't cruelty. It was cowardice dressed in compassion. And the distinction matters because when this person finally does speak, and they're going to very soon, possibly as the channel through which Wednesday's revelation arrives, the guilt they carry is going to be palpable. They're going to need you to understand why they waited. And whether you offer that understanding immediately or withhold it until your own processing is further along is entirely your right. Let me talk about what happens after the initial impact, because the days following Wednesday are going to be as significant as the revelation itself. There's going to be a period, brief but intense, where everything feels destabilized. Your sense of reality, your sense of self, your sense of who belongs in your life and who doesn't, your sense of what's real and what was performance, all of it is going to be in flux. And during that flux, people are going to try to manage you. They're going to try to control the narrative of your response. Some will urge you toward immediate forgiveness. Others will urge you toward immediate severing. Everyone will have an opinion about what you should do, how you should feel, how quickly you should process, what the right response looks like. And I need you to make a commitment to yourself right now before any of that noise begins. You will not let anyone else author your reaction. This is your truth to process, your pain to feel, your decision to make. And you will make it on your own timeline, in your own way, guided by your own wisdom and not by the anxious, self-interested advice of people who may have their own reasons for wanting you to respond in a particular direction. Some of the people urging you to forgive quickly will be doing so because your continued anger is inconvenient for them, because it disrupts the social structure they benefit from. Because if you stay angry long enough, your anger might start asking questions they don't want answered, questions about what they knew, when they knew it, why they didn't tell you. Beware of those voices. They sound like love, they feel like support, but their primary motivation is the restoration of a status quo that served them, and that status quo required your ignorance. Your awakening threatens their comfort, and comfort, when it depends on someone else's deception, is not a comfort worth preserving. I also want to speak to the physical symptoms you might experience around Wednesday, because spiritual revelations don't just happen in the mind, they happen in the body. You might feel a sudden onset of fatigue so heavy it feels like your bones are made of lead. Or the opposite, a surge of adrenaline so sharp that sitting still becomes impossible and you need to move, walk, pace, clean. Do anything to discharge the electrical storm happening inside your nervous system. You might feel nausea, chest tightness, a headache that sits right behind your eyes, in the space where clarity and confusion are battling for dominance. You might cry suddenly and without warning, not in response to a specific thought, but as a physical release, your body shedding what your mind hasn't finished processing. All of this is normal. All of this is your system doing exactly what it's designed to do when it encounters information that fundamentally restructures your understanding of your own life. Don't pathologize it. Don't medicate it away unless the symptoms become genuinely unmanageable. Let your body do its work. It knows how to process this. It's been waiting to process this for longer than your conscious mind has known there was anything to process. There's a gift hidden inside this revelation, And I almost hesitate to mention it because calling anything about this experience a gift might feel obscene when you're standing in the wreckage of a trusted relationship. But the gift is real, and you'll see it not immediately, not on Wednesday, probably not for a while, but eventually when the dust settles and the grief transitions from acute to manageable, you're going to see it with absolute clarity. The gift is this. You are being freed from a false foundation. Everything you build from this point forward will be built on truth, not curated truth. Not managed truth, not the version of truth that someone else decided you could handle. Raw, unfiltered, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes inconvenient, always honest truth. And building on that foundation produces something entirely different from what can be built on deception. It produces relationships that can bear weight, decisions that hold up under scrutiny, a sense of self that doesn't waver when challenged because it's rooted in reality rather than in someone else's construction. For those of you who keep showing up here on Mary's Angel Tarot and feeling these messages land in places that other words don't reach, I want to say something specifically about the pattern of revelation that's been operating in your life. This isn't the first truth that's surfaced recently. There's been a series of unveilings, some dramatic, some quiet, some arriving as sudden insights, and others as slow dawnings, and they're all connected. The universe is conducting a systematic audit of the false structures in your life, and it's dismantling them one by one with the patient, thorough precision of someone who knows that lasting freedom requires the removal of every lie, not just the obvious ones. Wednesday's revelation is perhaps the most significant in this series, the one that pulls the largest thread, the one that unravels the most when it's pulled, but it's not the last. There are other truths still making their way toward the surface, other deceptions still in the process of being exposed, and each one will add another layer of clarity to the picture that's forming. By the time this process is complete, you will be standing in a reality that is entirely, uncomfortably, magnificently true. And you will discover that the person you are in truth is far more powerful than the person you were in fiction. I need to circle back to the brutality I mentioned at the beginning, because I want to make sure you understand what I mean and what I don't mean by that word. The brutality is not cruelty. It's not punitive. The universe is not punishing you by exposing this truth. It's liberating you. But liberation, when it requires the demolition of something you've built your emotional life around, feels brutal. Like surgery without full anesthesia. Like a bone being reset without warning. The pain is real. The disruption is real. But the brutality is in service of healing, not in service of harm. And when you're in the middle of it, when the pain is at its peak and the temptation to shoot the messenger is almost irresistible, I need you to hold on to this distinction. What's happening to you is not what's being done to you. Nobody is choosing to hurt you by revealing this truth. The truth is simply doing what truth does when it's been caged. It escapes. Violently, if necessary, destructively, if the structures around it were built to contain it, but always, always in the direction of freedom. There's something about Wednesday, specifically about the energy of that particular day that I want to name. It's a threshold day, a day where the veil between what's known and what's unknown is thinner than usual. A day where hidden things have less cover, where the shadows that conceal become transparent, where the infrastructure of deception that normally holds firm develops cracks that cannot be patched. I don't know whether this is astronomical, spiritual, or simply the convergence of human circumstances reaching a tipping point. But the energy of that day is configured for disclosure. It's as if the universe has designated it as a day where secrets lose their structural integrity. And the secret that has been kept from you, regardless of how well it was maintained, how carefully it was guarded, how many people were complicit in its preservation, that secret does not survive Wednesday. It cannot. The conditions that allowed it to remain hidden are evaporating, and no amount of human effort can restore them. The truth is coming out. The only variable is how you receive it. And that's the piece I want to leave you with. Not the content of the revelation. You'll know that soon enough. And knowing it now wouldn't serve you. What I want to leave you with is the understanding that how you receive this truth will determine whether it becomes a wound or a doorway. A wound keeps you focused on what was taken, what was lost, what was broken. A doorway invites you to step through into what becomes possible when the obstruction is removed. Both responses are valid in the short term, but in the long term, the doorway is where your life is. The doorway is where the version of you that exists beyond this deception is waiting, not diminished by the revelation, but expanded by it, more discerning, more self-trusting, more aligned with the kind of relationships and structures that are built on honesty rather than convenience. On Thursday morning, the morning after, you're going to wake up in a world that looks the same but feels fundamentally different. The furniture hasn't moved. The walls are still standing. But something in the air has changed. A density has lifted. A weight that you didn't fully register until its removal has been taken from your shoulders. And in that lightness, in that strange new spaciousness, you're going to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Something that might take you a moment to identify because it's been so long since you experienced it without contamination. It's peace, not the managed peace of someone who has learned to function within dysfunction, not the performative peace of someone who says they're fine because the alternative is too complicated to explain. Real peace. The peace that comes from standing on solid ground, from knowing that the reality you're operating in, however painful its acquisition, is true. And from understanding that truth, even when it arrives brutally, is always, always the beginning of something better than the lie it replaces. Wednesday is coming, and I know that sounds ominous, and I know there's a part of you that wants to brace against it, to find a way to prepare that cushions the blow, to gather enough spiritual armor to make the impact bearable. But here's what I want to tell you, and it's the most important thing I've said in this entire message. You don't need armor. You've already survived worse than this. You've already endured things that should have broken you and didn't. You've already proven through the sheer fact of your continued existence and your continued openness and your continued willingness to show up to messages like this one with your heart still functioning, that you are capable of absorbing a truth that lesser spirits would crumble under. You are not fragile. You are not going to shatter. You are going to shake. You are going to rage. You are going to grieve. And then, with the quiet, stubborn, almost unreasonable resilience that has defined your entire journey, you are going to stand up, survey the new landscape of your reality, and begin building something honest on the ground that's been cleared. The truth doesn't come to destroy you. It comes because you're finally strong enough to carry it. And what you build with it, on the other side of the shock and the fury and the tears, is going to be the most authentic, most aligned, most genuinely yours creation you've ever brought into being. Because for the first time, possibly in your entire life, you'll be building without a lie hidden in the foundation. And structures built on truth don't crumble. They stand, they hold. They become the kind of home your soul has been searching for: stable, transparent, real in every direction, with no hidden rooms and no locked doors and no splinters buried beneath the surface waiting to inflame. Wednesday gives you the truth. What you do with it builds the rest of your life. And the rest of your life, I promise you, is worth every brutal, beautiful, necessary second of what it costs to get there. All right. Thank you so much for watching Mary's Angel Tarot. Take care of your energy, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye.